Hello everyone, today I'm going to be talking to you about America's most infamous cults. Now imagine if one man could kill 900 people in an instant. It seems impossible, right? Well, not for Jim Jones, leader of the People's Temple. He was able to coerce over 900 people in his congregation to commit suicide without hesitation. It's pretty crazy to think that one man could do this, but cult leaders have a similar charisma to them that make people want to follow their lead. Ultimately, a lot of these situations end in infamy and in destruction. We'll get back to Jim Jones in a little bit, but today I'm going to talk to you about three of the most infamous cults, the leaders which led them, the leaders' ideologies and doctrines, how they got people within their congregation, and also the downfall of their cults. So the three cults that I want to talk to you about are the Branch Davidians, the Manson family, and thirdly, I want to talk to you about the People's Temple. So why do you care about cults? Why would you care to listen to this? Well, the thing about cults is they are appealing to all walks of life. People are involved in cults as doctors, lawyers, janitors, educators, old people, young people, middle-aged people. I mean, it's all walks of life can be manipulated by these men that are these religious leaders in cults. So I think it's important for you to educate yourself about historically what's happened and to kind of look at the signs of where these men could be and kind of the situations that you can protect yourself from in the long run. Now first I'm going to talk to you about the Branch Davidians. Now this one's close to home. Waco, Texas, they had a commune there. And the leader of this Branch Davidian church was David Koresh. Now he was a self-proclaimed messiah, very eccentric. He believed in a doomsday prophecy of an apocalypse where the government would come in and there would be a war, and he wanted, ultimately, a lot of people within his church to fight these people off and follow him to the death. Now, because of this, he was very weary and didn't like people leaving the congregation, so they were often out of society, and it got a little crazy as time went on. He got to where he said that all marriages were annulled, that men were now to be celibate, and that all the women in the church were to be his wives, and that God told him this. That was fine and all for a lot of people, until he started going for the children, for the girls that were underage. Now it got to where he took an 11-year-old child named Curie Jewel and made her his wife as an 11-year-old child. This was a part of ABC News. Now, that became an issue and was a pop-up for the government. He got on their radar. Also, another person, Clive Doyle, who was involved in the Branch Davidian Church, he is 77 now, but he also escaped the church. According to People's Magazine, he reported that Koresh had been stockpiling weapons and sexually abusing children for years. So with all of this adding up, all of this getting heavier and heavier, obviously the government was going to get involved. Ultimately, 75 Davidians, including 25 children and Koresh himself, died on April 19, 1993, when the compound was set ablaze after a 51-day FBI siege. This was reported by People's Magazine in a news article, and ultimately that was the demise of David Koresh. Sadly, only 9 people survived and got out of that fire, and the rest of his followers followed him to his death. Now, the next person I want to talk about is Charles Manson, who was the leader of the Manson family. Now, Charles Manson was popular in his cult during the mid and late 60s, whenever the hippie movement was arising. He was very eccentric as well, but he was able to lure in young followers with drugs, with sex, with love, and the guise of being a family together. Now, he wasn't that bad until he came up with his helter-skelter ideology. With this, he believed that a Beatles song, Talk to Him, by the Beatles, talked to him and told him that there was going to be a race war apocalypse. And so, according to Charles Giles, author of news article The Devil Inside, Helter Skelter was called basically struck by the racial violence gripping American cities. Manson predicted a series of gory, black-on-white murders that would set off retaliatory attacks across the country, which would then trigger a war of annihilation between racist and non-racist whites. The family, he said, would wait out the violence in a secret underground city beneath California's Death Valley, then return to assume control of the country from blacks who would not be capable of ruling themselves. So Manson was obviously not progressive, but he was quite a doomsday person himself. Now, his followers believed him until time and time again nothing happened. And months had gone by and there was no apocalypse. So what Manson thought to do was, let's jumpstart this race war. Now, what him and his most loyal followers did was they dressed up under the guise of the Black Panthers and black soldiers and invaded the homes of many different people in a 48-hour period and brutally murdered 7 people. Now, within this time, Manson himself was not physically involved in the murders, but he is known to have manipulated and quote-unquote brainwashed his victims. Ultimately, he went to jail for all of the series of events, and he died in jail in 2017. So the next person I want to talk about, and the next cult I want to talk about, is the People's Temple, which was ruled by Jim Jones. Now, the People's Temple originally was in Illinois, in the United States, and this was during the 50s and 60s when Jim Jones's cult was gaining a following. He was very progressive during his time. Before even the civil rights movement was happening, he was very progressive about integration in churches, and whenever you would walk into Jim Jones's church, there would be people of all colors, all walks of life in his setting. So at first, Jim Jones was fairly a good person. I mean, he was really good at hiding it for a while. But then, the dark side of Jim Jones came out. Now, over time, whispers of Jones's drug use and sexual affairs with male and female congregants began to surface, and his need to control every aspect of his followers' lives grew more intense. This was reported by People's Magazine's article. Now, it got to the point where Jim Jones would have his followers sign blank sheets of paper and keep their signature in case he wanted to blackmail them later. He would take the deeds to their houses. He would pretend to be a spiritual healer. He would hire actors to pretend like they could get out of their wheelchairs and walk because of him. He was very eccentric in the way that he ruled within the church. So he was a socialist, which was really unpopular during the Republic of the United States. So he definitely had to move his church around. It got to where his church ended up in Guyana, which is in South America, and he started a compound there began with 150 people. Now this compound is probably the most infamous cults out of all because of the 900 people dying from suicide. Now, more than 900 people of the People's Temple religious sect had committed mass suicide by drinking cyanide-laced grape punch. Among the dead were 304 dead children. The largest mass suicide in modern history made headlines around the world as a shocking example of how the followers of a cult could be brainwashed into evil. Hundreds of followers willingly drank poison, and parents forced cyanide-filled syringes into the mouths of children too young to sip from cups. This was all a part of the People documentary and article about Jim Jones's mass suicide. So ultimately, Jim Jones was very aggressive with his followers. He would beat them until they were bloody. He was a con artist, all of the above. Anyways, that was the demise of Jim Jones. Ultimately, we talked about the Branch Davidians, their demise. We talked about we talked about the People's Temple, and we also talked about Helter Skelter, Manson family, how it all surrounded that. Basically, what I want to leave you off with is, if you were in a cult, do you think you could survive unscathed after listening to this cult's talk? And do you think that you can see the signs of a true maniac leader in a cult? Thank you.